The silent gardens of the samurai. When we think of samurai, it is easy to picture flashing swords and thundering horses, yet behind the armor and steel was another world, a quieter one, where warriors sought balance and silence. The samurai were not only fighters, but also poets, philosophers, and seekers of peace. And nowhere was this spirit clearer than in the gardens, temples, and tea houses where they found stillness after battle. The samurai lived by the code of Bushido, which demanded not only courage and loyalty, but also harmony with life. They believed that a warrior must cultivate his spirit as carefully as his sword. For this reason, many samurai practiced Zen meditation. Sitting in stillness, eyes closed, they let go of fear and anger, training their minds to remain calm even in the face of death. A true samurai, they said, must conquer his spirit before he could ever conquer an enemy. The gardens of Japan reflected this philosophy. Samurai often walked through landscapes of raked sand, flowing streams, and perfectly placed stones. These gardens were not meant to impress with grandeur, but to teach the beauty of simplicity. Each tree, each ripple in the sand, reminded the warrior of balance. In these gardens, the samurai could listen to the whisper of wind through bamboo and the soft trickle of water, feeling peace wash over them like morning light. The tea ceremony was another path to tranquility. For a samurai, sharing tea was not about drinking, but about respect. Every movement of the host, the way water was poured, the way cups were offered, was filled with mindfulness. In that small, quiet room, rank and title faded away, Lord. And warrior, teacher, and student all became equals for a moment, united in stillness. For many samurai, the tea ceremony was as much a lesson in humility as the battlefield was a lesson in courage. Poetry, too, found a place in their lives. Samurai wrote haiku, short verses, capturing fleeting moments of nature. A falling cherry blossom, a bird taking flight, the sound of rain on armor, all became images of life's impermanence. In these poems, they found a way to express feelings. Too deep for the sword, a reminder that even warriors longed for beauty and tenderness. Stories tell of samurai who, after fierce battles, returned home and sat beneath the moon, laying down their swords to write verses or tend their gardens. For them, peace was not weakness. It was strength of a different kind. The strength to live fully in the present moment for the people of Japan. These quieter tales showed that the samurai spirit was not only forged in fire, but also in stillness. To hear them was to understand that true honor was not just about dying bravely, but living wisely. And so, as the night deepened and the wind whispered through the pines, listeners dreamed of serene gardens and soft lantern light, places where the warriors of old found peace, where the spirit of balance lives forever, the eternal spirit of Bushido, long after the clang of swords faded and the age of castles came to an end. The spirit of the samurai lived on. Their battles may have passed into memory, but their code, the way of Bushido, endured. It was more than rules for warriors. It was a philosophy, a path of life that still inspires people around the world. To speak of Bushido is to speak of the eternal flame that kept the samurai strong in both war and peace. Bushido. The way of the warrior was built on 7 virtues: honor, loyalty, courage, respect, honesty, compassion, and self-control. These were not just lofty words, but guiding stars. For a samurai, every choice, from the swing of a sword to the whisper of a poem, was shaped by these virtues. To forget them was to lose one's path, but to live by them was to shine with dignity. Honor was the heart of Bushido. Samurai would rather die than bring shame upon himself or his family. Loyalty was its foundation to one's lord, to one's comrades, to one's duty, courage meant more than charging into battle. It meant facing fear without hesitation, whether on the battlefield or in daily life. Respect was shown not only to lords and teachers, but even to enemies. For to fight without respect was to fight without meaning. Honesty bound the samurai to truth. Their word was a promise stronger than any sword. Compassion reminded them that strength must protect the weak, that even warriors must carry kindness. And self-control, perhaps the hardest of all, demanded mastery over the self, to remain calm in anger, steady in grief, and humble in victory. Together, these virtues shaped the soul of the samurai. They guided men and women not only in times of war, but in the quiet of gardens, the stillness of temples, and the tenderness of family life. Bushido reminded them that life was fleeting, like a cherry blossom falling in the spring breeze. What mattered was not how long one lived, but how honorably. Even after the samurai era ended, Bushido remained a thread woven into Japanese culture. It lived in the tea ceremony's grace, in the discipline of martial arts, in the quiet strength of those who faced hardship with dignity. It became a story told to children, a lesson whispered by elders, a guide for all who sought balance between strength and compassion, for listeners drifting into sleep. The spirit of Bushido offers comfort. It says that courage is found in the heart, that loyalty endures beyond time, that honor shines brighter than gold. It reminds us that even in modern life, we can walk as warriors, not with swords, but with virtues that never fade. And so, the samurai live on, not only in tales of battle, but in the eternal way of Bushido. Their code is a lantern in the dark, a song in the silence, a spirit that whispers across ages. Live with honor, walk with courage, protect with compassion. You too will carry the spirit of the samurai forever. The 47 Ronin among all the legends of the samurai. None is more famous or more moving than the story of the 47 Ronin. It is a tale of loyalty carried beyond death, honor upheld even when the price was life itself. For centuries, this story has been told in shrines, plays, and whispered bedtime tales. A reminder that true devotion never fades. The tale begins with a lord named Asano Naganori, who served the shogun in Edo, the city that would one day become Tokyo. Asano was known for his dignity and sense of justice, but he fell into conflict with a corrupt court official named Kira, who insulted him repeatedly and sought to humiliate him. At last, unable to endure further disgrace, Asano drew his sword within the shogun's palace, a grave crime. Though his attack wounded Kira, it broke the law. For this, Asano was ordered to commit seppuku, the ritual suicide of a samurai. His lands were seized, and his retainers were left without a master. These retainers, now Ronin, grieved not only for the loss of their lord, but also for the dishonor placed upon his name. Among them was Jishi Kuranosuke, their leader. While others might have scattered, he and his companions swore a secret oath. They would avenge their master, no matter how long it took, even if it meant their own deaths. For nearly 2 years, the 47 Ronin lived in disguise, hiding their true intentions. Some took humble jobs as merchants or laborers, pretending to abandon their loyalty. Jishi himself feigned a life of weakness, drinking and acting the fool, so that Kira would believe the Ronin had lost their spirit. But beneath this mask, their hearts burned with purpose. At last, on a snowy winter's night, they struck. Moving silently through Edo, they stormed Kira's mansion. The battle was fierce but swift, and the Ronin fought with the strength of men carrying not just swords, but the weight of justice. When Kira was found, they beheaded him and carried his head to Sengakuji Temple, where they laid it before Asano's grave, offering his spirit the vengeance he had been denied in life. The shogun was moved by their loyalty but bound by law. The ronin could not be pardoned, for they had taken justice into their own hands. And so, each of the 47 was ordered to commit seppuku. They obeyed without fear, meeting death with the same dignity that had guided their mission. They were buried beside their master, united in loyalty, even in death. To this day, their graves remain a place of honor where visitors leave incense and prayers. The story of the 47 Ronin is not simply one of revenge, but of devotion, a reminder that true loyalty outlives fear, time, and even death itself. And so, as night falls and we remember their tale, we feel the quiet strength of their spirits. Steadfast, unyielding, eternal. The 47 Ronin live on, not in body, but in the hearts of all who believe in honor beyond life. Samurai and the shogunin, the long history of Japan. Samurai were not only warriors of individual honor, they were also the pillars of a vast political system. At the very center of that system stood the shogun, the supreme military ruler of Japan. While the emperor remained a sacred figure, it was the shogun who held the power to command armies, control provinces, and shape the destiny of the nation. To serve the shogun was the greatest duty of the samurai, and their stories reveal a bond of loyalty that shaped centuries of history. The first shogun, Minamoto no Yoritomo, rose to power in the 12th century. His rule marked the birth of the shogunate, a system where military might guided the land more than imperial decree. For the samurai, this meant their service was no longer just to noble lords, but ultimately to the shogun himself, who stood as the living embodiment of order and authority. Samurai serving the shogun were expected to show absolute devotion. They patrolled cities, guarded palaces, and led armies into battle at the shogun's command. Yet their service was not only measured in combat, they also lived as symbols of discipline and stability, ensuring that villages remained peaceful. Farmers could till their fields, and travelers could cross roads without fear. Legends speak of samurai who stood watch over the shogun through long nights, never blinking, their hands resting on their swords, their spirits sharp as steel. Others tell of warriors who carried secret messages across dangerous lands, guided by loyalty rather than fear. In times of war, entire clans answered the call of the shogun, riding together under banners that fluttered like waves across the horizon. But devotion to the shogun was not without sacrifice. Many samurai faced impossible orders, battles where defeat was certain, sieges where surrender meant dishonor. Yet they carried out their duty with calm resolve, believing that to serve faithfully was greater than to live in doubt. Their courage inspired generations, and their names were written into scrolls and carved into monuments. Still, the relationship between samurai and shogun was not always without tension. Some lords grew too ambitious, testing the limits of their loyalty. Bushido demanded obedience, and most samurai followed their ruler's command, even when it pulled them toward danger or sorrow. Their strength lay in the trust that their sacrifice served a higher purpose, the stability of Japan itself, for the people. The sight of samurai in service to the shogun was comforting. It meant that the land was guarded, that justice was upheld, that chaos was held at bay. To hear stories of these warriors was to feel a quiet pride, reminder that discipline and loyalty were the foundation of peace. And so, as villagers whispered these tales beneath lantern light, they imagined tall warriors standing at the gates of castles, their armor gleaming under the moon, their swords silent yet ready. In their service to the shogun, the samurai carried not only their own honor, but the honor of all Japan. The tale of the Roninumum, the many figures in samurai lore, none stirred more fascination than the Ronin, the masterless samurai. To be a Ronin was to walk a lonely path, no lord to serve, no home to guard, only one's honor to carry. Their stories were bittersweet, filled with hardship, but also with freedom. They stood as reminders that even in loss, a warrior's spirit could endure. The word Ronin means wave man, like a wave drifting without anchor, carried wherever the current might take it. When a lord was killed, dishonored, or stripped of power, his samurai often became Ronin. Some chose to follow their master into death, committing ritual seppuku to prove their loyalty. Others continued to live, wandering the countryside with their swords, searching for purpose in a world that no longer had a place for them. Villagers told tales of Ronin arriving silently at dusk, their armor worn, their eyes heavy with the weight of battles long past. Some were mercenaries, offering their swords for coin. Others became protectors of small towns, defending farmers from bandits without asking for reward. Though many feared their wild independence, others respected them as warriors who lived only by their own honor. One story speaks of a Ronin named Hachiro, who traveled alone through mountains and forests. Though masterless, he lived by Bushido, refusing to abandon the values that had shaped his life. In one village, when raiders threatened, Hachiro stood alone at the gates, sword drawn. The villagers watched in awe as he fought fiercely, not for land or lord, but for justice itself. When the raiders fled, Hachiro disappeared without thanks, vanishing into the mist, his honor intact. But the life of a Ronin was not easy. Without a master, many faced poverty and scorn. Samurai society valued loyalty above all, and to lose one's lord was seen as a kind of failure. Ronin wandered roads with little food, often forced to sell their armor or take humble work. Yet in their solitude, they carried a unique strength, a reminder that true honor came not from titles, but from the choices one made in silence. Some Ronin banded together, forming small groups that roamed the land. Others became teachers, passing on swordsmanship to peasants and young warriors. A few turned bitter, straying from Bushido and falling into crime. But even these darker tales showed the power of freedom. The Ronin lived without chains, guided only by their own hearts. For the people of Japan, the Ronin embodied both tragedy and inspiration. They were proof that even when the world stripped a man of his place, he could still walk with dignity. Around fires, families spoke of them as wandering stars, lonely but shining, lighting paths for those who needed protection. And so, the tale of the Ronin became a lullaby of resilience. To hear it was to understand that even in loss, there can be honor. Even in solitude, there can be strength. And even a wave drifting without anchor can carry the spirit of a warrior across endless seas. Women of the samurai. When people think of the samurai, they often imagine armored men with swords gleaming in the sun. But hidden within Japan's history are the powerful and inspiring stories of Anna Bugeisha. The women of the samurai class, who carried blades with the same courage and devotion as their male counterparts. Their tales remind us that honor, loyalty, and bravery were not bound by gender, by spirit. These warrior women were trained in the arts of combat from a young age. While their brothers practiced with swords and bows, daughters of samurai families were taught to wield the naginata, a long pole weapon with a curved blade. Its reach gave them an advantage, allowing them to defend homes and villages with both strength and grace. They also learned archery and self-defense, for in times of war, no one was spared the responsibility of protection. Legends speak of Tomo Gozan, perhaps the most celebrated of all samurai women. She lived during the 12th century and fought bravely alongside her lord, Minamata no Yoshinaka. Stories describe her as beautiful, yet fierce, a master of the bow and the blade. In one famous battle, she rode into the fray, cutting down warriors with such skill that even her enemies marveled at her courage. To this day, she is remembered as a symbol of strength and loyalty, her name echoing through history like the ring of steel. But not all Anabugeisha fought on distant battlefields. Many stood as defenders of their homes while the men were away. During sieges, women took up weapons to guard castles, protect children, and ensure that their families survived. In moments of danger, they showed that their resolve was no less fierce than that of their husbands, fathers, and sons. Their bravery brought peace of mind, for samurai lords knew their homes were in safe hands. Beyond combat, these women lived with the same devotion to Bushido as their male counterparts. Honor, loyalty, and self-discipline guided their lives. Some wrote poetry, practiced calligraphy, and carried the quiet strength of wisdom, balancing the fierceness of the sword with the gentleness of care. In their presence, the household was not just a place of warmth, but also a fortress of spirit. For the people of Japan, the Anabugeisha were living proof that courage blooms in every heart. They inspired tales told to children by candlelight, stories of mothers and daughters who stood unyielding in the face of danger. These stories whispered that bravery was not only found on the battlefield, but also in the courage to protect what one loves, as the moonlight bathed the quiet gardens of Japan. Villagers imagined women standing tall at castle gates Naginata, in hand, their silhouettes steady against the horizon. And as listeners closed their eyes, they felt comforted by the thought that courage is universal, that within both men and women, the spirit of the samurai shines brightly, eternal, and unbreakable. The loyal retainer in the heart of the samurai's world. One bond stood above all others, the bond between lord and retainer. For the samurai, loyalty was not just a virtue, it was the very breath of life. To serve faithfully, even unto death, was considered the highest honor. This devotion shaped countless legends, whispered from one generation to the next, reminding all who listened that the true strength of a warrior was not his sword, but his loyalty. From the earliest days, samurai pledged themselves to a daimyo, a powerful lord who ruled over lands and people. The samurai swore to protect him, to fight for him, and to uphold his name. In return, the lord gave the samurai purpose, land, and a place in the world. But this bond was more than an agreement. It was sacred, sealed with the spirit of Bushido. Legends tell of retainers who remained faithful even when their lords were gone. One story speaks of a samurai who continued to tend the gardens of his master's estate for years after his death, refusing to abandon the home he had sworn to protect. Villagers would see him kneeling at the gates, bowing to an empty house, his loyalty stronger than grief. Another tale describes warriors who rode into impossible battles because their lord had commanded it. They did not ask if the cause was hopeless. They did not weigh their own survival. Their only question was, how can I serve? To them, honor was measured not in victory, but in faithfulness. Perhaps the most famous example of this devotion is the story of the 47 Ronin retainers who avenged their lord even after his death, knowing that their actions would cost them their lives. They became symbols of ultimate loyalty, their story celebrated in plays, poems, and shrines across Japan. To this day, their tale is told not as tragedy, but as triumph of honor over fear. For the samurai, loyalty was more than duty, was identity. A warrior without loyalty was considered lost, like a blade without a handle or a bow without a string. Even in times of hardship, even when tempted with riches or power from enemies, a true retainer stood firm. To betray one's lord was to betray one's soul. And yet, loyalty was not blind. In its purest form, it was guided by respect and love. Many lords treated their retainers as family, and in return, the samurai guarded them with their lives. This bond wove together the very fabric of Japanese society, creating trust, order, stability in uncertain times. As night settled across ancient Japan, families told stories of the loyal retainers. Children drifted to sleep imagining samurai standing guard at castle gates, their armor gleaming in moonlight, their swords ready but sheathed, their hearts steady with devotion. In their silence, people felt safe, knowing that somewhere out there was a warrior whose loyalty could not be broken, even by death itself. Spirits of the battlefield, to the samurai, was not only a place of clashing swords and flying arrows, it was also a realm of whispers and shadows, where spirits were said to walk among the living. In ancient Japan, war was never far from the unseen world. Samurai often believed that when steel struck steel, the boundaries between the mortal and the spiritual grew thin. And in that fragile space, ghosts and demons sometimes appeared. Legends tell of samurai marching beneath pale moons, their armor creaking softly as fog rolled across the fields. In the silence before battle, men claimed to hear voices calling from the mist, the cries of warriors long fallen, urging them onward or warning them to turn back. Some believed these voices were ancestors, offering guidance. Others whispered that they were restless souls, unable to leave the earth where their blood had been spilled. One tale tells of a warrior named Takamura, who fought bravely in countless battles. On a stormy night, as lightning split the sky, he swore he saw figures in tattered armor rising from the ground. Their eyes glowed faintly, their blades rusted but lifted with purpose. They circled him, not in anger, but as if to test his courage. Takamura stood firm, bowing his head in respect, and when he raised his eyes again, the spirits were gone. Leaving only the sound of the rain, the samurai called such beings yurei, the spirits of those who died with unfinished duty. To face them required not only strength, but calmness of heart. For a frightened warrior might falter, but one who carried honor could walk safely. Even in the company of ghosts, beyond spirits of the dead, there were also tales of yokai, strange creatures said to roam battlefields at night. Some took the form of animals with glowing eyes. Others appeared as shifting shadows. They were not always foes. Sometimes they guided lost soldiers home. Other times they lured them deeper into danger. The samurai learned to walk carefully, carrying prayers and charms to protect against unseen forces. Yet not all spirits were ominous. Many samurai believed their ancestors rode with them, unseen but close, strengthening their arms and steadying their hearts. Before battle, they often bowed their heads, whispering thanks to those who came before. To fight bravely was not only for one's lord, but also to honor the spirits watching from beyond. For the people who heard these stories, the battlefield became more than a place of blood and steel. It was a bridge between worlds where courage was tested not only against enemies, but also against fear itself. The samurai who stood unshaken amid ghostly whispers became legends, their names carried in songs and poems. And so, as listeners drifted into dreams, they imagined foggy fields where faint figures shimmered in the moonlight, where samurai stood tall and unafraid, and where the spirits of the battlefield walked quietly beside the living, reminding them that honor endures, even beyond death. The birth of the samurai long ago. In the misty mountains and quiet valleys of ancient Japan, a new kind of warrior began to emerge. These were not simply fighters with swords, but guardians bound by honor, loyalty, and discipline. Samurai, and their story begins not with battle, but with duty, the duty to protect, to serve, and to live by a code greater than themselves. The roots of the samurai stretch back to the early Heian period. Over 1,000 years ago, Japan was a land of shifting clans, noble families, and emperors who ruled from distant palaces. While the court in Kyoto enjoyed poetry, art, and ceremony, the countryside was wild, and power often rested in the hands of local lords. To defend their lands, these lords began to call upon skilled warriors, men trained not only to fight, but to embody discipline and loyalty. Over time, these warriors formed a class of their own. They were more than mercenaries. They lived by a set of principles later known as Bushido, the way of the warrior. This code was built upon respect, honesty, loyalty, and courage. To follow Bushido meant that a samurai's life was not his own. His life belonged to his lord, his family, and his honor. Even death was not something to be feared if it was met with dignity. The early samurai were often seen riding swift horses, clad in armor made of leather and iron plates, carrying bows and later the katana, the sword that would become their soul, but their strength was not in weapons alone. Their true power came from their spirit, calm, unwavering, and disciplined. Like the steady flow of a river cutting through stone. Stories tell of these warriors as protectors of villages and loyal retainers of great houses. They were guardians of peace, standing watch over fields and farms, ensuring that the weak were shielded from harm. But in their stillness was also a fire. On the battlefield, their discipline made them formidable, their courage unshakable, their loyalty unbreakable. As centuries passed, the image of the samurai grew into legend. They were celebrated in poems, painted in scrolls, and honored in shrines. Children listened wide-eyed as elders told stories of warriors who chose death before dishonor, who remained loyal even when betrayed, who found balance between the sword and the spirit. The birth of the samurai was more than the rise of warriors. It was the birth of a way of life, one that blended discipline with compassion, strength with wisdom, and duty with honor. They were not merely men with weapons, they were living symbols of balance, a harmony between the fierce and the gentle. And so, in the quiet nights of ancient Japan, as fires burned low and the wind carried the sound of bamboo rustling, people whispered stories of these warriors. To hear them was to feel safe, to imagine a protector standing silently in the shadows, guarding the land, guarding the soul of Japan itself. The way of the sword. If the soul of the samurai could be placed in a single object, it would rest in the curve of the katana, the sacred sword of Japan. To the samurai, the blade was not merely a weapon of steel, but a living spirit, a mirror of the warrior's heart. Its gleaming edge reflected both the discipline of the body and the purity of the soul, and its story is as ancient and enchanting as the warriors who carried it. The making of a katana was no simple craft. It was a ritual, a sacred act passed from master swordsmith to apprentice across generations. Iron was folded and hammered again and again, layer upon layer, until the metal itself seemed alive. Sparks lit up the forge like fireflies, while the swordsmith whispered prayers, purifying the blade with both fire and intention. Each hammer strike was more than sound. It was rhythm, breath, and devotion. By the time the blade was complete, it was said to hold not just strength, but spirit. For the samurai, to receive a sword was a moment of deep ceremony. They did not draw it lightly, nor wield it without thought.
Ow.
The katana symbolized loyalty, courage, and honor. It reminded them that their lives were bound to a higher code, that their actions should be as precise and clear as the cut of its edge. To disrespect the sword was to disrespect themselves. Legends speak of samurai who treated their swords as companions. Some gave their blades names as though they were living beings. Others carried them with quiet reverence, polishing them daily, never letting them dull or grow rusty. The katana became so closely tied to the warrior spirit that when a samurai passed away, His sword often accompanied him, laid at his side as he journeyed into the afterlife. Yet, the sword was not only for battle, it was also a teacher. Samurai believed that in the curve of the blade, one could learn discipline and patience. The edge of the sword demanded stillness of mind, for even a careless moment could bring disaster. In practice halls, young warriors bowed to their swords, treating each strike as a meditation, each movement as a lesson in balance. Tales tell of duels where two warriors met in silence, their blades unsheathed only after long moments of stillness. The outcome was often decided in a single strike, not just a clash of steel, but a meeting of spirits. Victory was not always about skill. It was about clarity, calmness, and the ability to face life and death without fear. The way of the sword was, in truth, the way of the samurai. To wield a katana was to carry honor, to walk with humility, and to remember that strength must always be tempered with wisdom. As the moon rose over quiet villages and the night breeze whispered through the pines, the people believed that somewhere samurai sat, polishing his blade by lantern light, steady, calm, and ready to defend with the spirit of the sword that was his soul.